Hello everybody and welcome back to Snack Break, the perfect podcast to pop on while preparing your cup of tea or ideal snack or beverage. It's been a little while since we've done your traditional normal Snack Break episode, so to welcome you back, we've got one jam-packed full of content. We're going to be discussing loads of things in pop culture news, from D23, all Pixar, Disney, Marvel, everything, all the announcements there, to Minecraft, as well as reviewing the side character, largely ignored blockbuster of the summer, Twisters. Following this, we'll be giving you another podcast to peruse amidst your Spotify scrollings, as well as chatting a little bit about the podcast's future. Don't worry, it's hopefully not ending. So, without further ado, let's get into it. We begin, though, with a little bit of what has been happening with this podcast. I mentioned earlier that later in the episode we will be discussing our plans for the future of the show, but what have I been up to? Where have you been, Bendigo Blue, you evil little goblin? Well, for a start, you might notice this episode sounding a little bit different, hopefully a little bit crisper and a little bit clearer. That is because we've now moved over to a brand new setup in a sense. We're still on the old 2014 iMac, which I say old, but it's a loving sort of old, like a lovely old dog, a lovely old horse, that type of thing. And we're now plugged into that. We now have the Zoom PodTrack P8, which is a lovely mixer. Which boasts 5 mic inputs as well as controls for sound pads. That does a thing. I can plug my phone in, do all sorts of great stuff with it, and so far, from my couple of weeks of using it thus far, it's a really, really nice device. Plugged into that, we have the Rode Pod Mic. I was going to put something at the end of it, but no, it's just called that. It's the Rode Pod Mic. It's a device that's been out for about 6 years now. I believe it released in 2018, and again, I'd highly recommend, but if things sound a little bit weird, that's because we're still chopping and changing away at some things. So please give us a little time to sort things out there. And recommendations regarding how I fine-tune the sound of the pod mic to fit my voice. I've already put a little bit more low end on there, which to the tech nerds out there will hopefully mean a lot. Please do let me know. As always, in that case, you can email the show at hwsnackbreakpodcast@gmail.com. But aside from that, I've been working away on my other YouTube channel, which is the Bendigo Blue Gaming channel, over the last couple of weeks, sort of in middle to end of the traditional UK summer. I've been working on a big project called Quickcraft, which is a partly survival Minecraft SMP in which me and a bunch of friends come together, and it is simply pure chaos. I've got about, I was going to say 2 or 3, but it's actually more than that. I've got 4 or 5 videos out on that so far, so you can go check those out if you want to. And we've also been having a ton of fun over on the Twitch and the YouTube, streaming some good old Mario Kart. So, that's all for me. But what about you? Please do let me know. Drop down in the comments, or as I mentioned, email us. For now, though, it's time for Pop Culture News. We begin with D23. Yes, the biannual Ultimate Disney fan event allowed dedicated fans to gather in Anaheim for announcements of the Mouse House's next big projects. This time around, they included Incredibles 3, Toy Story 5, Hoppers, which we'll talk about a little bit later, a new Tron movie, Frozen 3 and 4, Marvel Zombies, The Mandalorian and Grogu, and many, many more. If that sounds interesting to you, I would highly recommend you could check out the YouTube channel Dave Lee Down Under. Him, alongside a bunch of other creatives on the interwebs, have posted full breakdowns. I was going to do one for Snack Break, but sadly we just haven't had the time to pump one of those out. But there's so many projects in there that I'm really, really excited about. Some I'm a little on the fence regarding. We talked on the live stream recently with A-Plays about how, there's a lot of sequels in there, but Hoppers, if I had to pick one original film announcement, and there weren't that many from D23 this time around, I would have to choose Hoppers. It's a new Pixar movie coming in 2026 that is going to be directed by the one and only Daniel Chong of We Bare Bears fame. And, well, I don't talk about it that much, and I genuinely don't talk about it that much. I bring it up when I need to, but I do love a little bit of Wee Bear Bears. That show holds a very, very special place in my heart. So Frozen 3 and 4, also very exciting. I was originally a little skeptical, but when Jennifer Lee, I believe, got up on stage and sort of did a PowerPoint, a high school-esque PowerPoint, about all the questions that remain unanswered in the Frozen verse. I can kind of see it. I presume it'll be something Infinity War and Endgame-esque in that, and there'll probably be a two-parter. Mandalorian and Grogu also coming out in 2 years' time. Very, very exciting. Incredibles 3, have to see what they do with that. Brad Bird is back. Toy Story 5. Woody's back, which I don't totally understand. I think the movie is going to focus around the toys basically against the internet and how that plays into things. Obviously something that the franchise hasn't acknowledged yet and is a pretty prevalent factor in the childhoods of many coming up today. We know, we all hear about iPad babies all the time, and they are now walking and living amongst us. Oh, it's terrifying. It's really not. But there looks to be a very strong creative team behind that. I don't have the name to hand right now, but if you want to go check that out, you definitely can. It looks to be very strong, but I think the risk it plays, and I think it was Daz Reviews commentator who pointed this out, is that this movie not only is bringing Woody back, and so could annoy people on that front, though they're going to have to be very careful, I believe, with how they go about that, and I'm sure they will be. But it could also just come off as a little bit grating. The parents are going to have issues with another Toy Story movie, or maybe they won't, but it's aimed at the parents to a degree, and it might deliver a nice message in that. Don't raise your kids on iPads, I guess. Is that your thing? But for the kids, it might just come off as quite grating in that this is all they've known. And so I'm curious to see in the next 2 years and before eventually the movie's release how they're going to go about with that. But moving on from D23, Fall Guys has finally come to mobile. The push and shove bean game, did I really write that? Which has previously been limited to PC and console releases, is now available worldwide on Android and on iOS in the European Union. It's a bit fancy. I'm in the UK. I don't seem to be able to get on the App Store yet, so we'll see how things go with that. But as they said in the comments of the trailer, Stumble Guys, your days may be limited. And last but not least, MCC Rising 3 was announced. Following the announcement, hopeful YouTubers and streamers united in teams of 4 to release submissions for Minecraft's most popular event. Teams are as of yet unannounced, but the event will take place on September 8th. And just as of a few hours ago now, we've got our first little batch of teams out for that. So you can go check those out if you so wish, but we'll hopefully get you updates on those in due course once we've got all of those out in the open. MC Rising and MCC in general obviously is an amazingly well organised and just generally a very cool event. I was very keen to apply, but sadly I had different paths of interest from different people. I messaged some people said no, some people said yes, and sadly we just couldn't get it together in time. But nonetheless, I will watch enviously as streamers who were previously relatively unknown rise to the top, as the name suggests, on one very, very special event. And the trailer released for the Grand Tour, One for the Road. The special will see the beloved Clarkson, May and Hammond trio crossing Zimbabwe in what will be their final special together. It will release on Prime Video on September 13th, concluding what has been a 22-year collaboration that has delighted millions across the globe. And finally now, last but not least, the trailer for Lord of the Rings, The War of Rohirrim released. The anime, which tells of the fate of the House of Helm Hammerhead, the legendary king of Rohan, end quotation, is set to release this December. And while protagonist here Hammerhead wasn't mentioned by name in Tolkien's writings, she was described as Hammerhead's daughter. I'm sure that will mean a lot of things to a lot of people. Looks cool. Whether it's going to be one I end up seeing in cinemas, I'm not entirely sure, or whether I'll end up watching where it comes to streaming. Up for debate, but animation looks absolutely beautiful, looks intense. I don't really know what Lord of the Rings fans are going to think I've struggled to find opinions online thus far. Certainly people who I know are Lord of the Rings fans so far that I've spoken to in my personal life have been skeptical at best. But I'm sure it will, I'm not sure. Hopefully it will still find its audience. And that is you now up to date with this episode's edition of Pop Culture News. Time now for the return of Bendigo's Unnamed Review segment, which still 100 episodes of another podcast and several of this one later remains unnamed, so help for that, much appreciated. Today, however, we are going to be discussing the blockbuster hit of the summer. It's... No, not Deadpool and Wolverine. Yeah, you could argue that... Yeah, I see your point. Anyway, nearly 30 years after the original's release, Tornado Chasers make a return to the big screen in Twisters, a 2-hour romp following Daisy Edgar Jones's Kate Stewart as, following a devastating tornado accident, returns to the field, soon meeting Glen Powell's YouTube superstar Tyler Owens. The story is actually, surprisingly, centered in a human drama, with Edgar Jones, Powell, and Anthony Ramos, who plays scientist friend Javi, providing a plot which expertly balances cinema-breaking effect with emotional resonance surrounding sacrifice, trauma, and venture capitalism. That took me by surprise, and, I liked it. While I can't say too much about it, I appreciate the film's take on Powell's character, who, the black sheep amongst a group of uber-technical scientists, has found fame as a YouTuber Twitch streamer archetype. Annoyingly, despite regularly informing us that he is a YouTuber, what is clearly the Twitch dashboard can be seen briefly as car speeds towards swirling, screaming tornadoes. But, as things go, I can kind of forgive them for that. Of course, as much as I was pleasantly surprised by the story here, we can all appreciate that it is really just laying the groundwork for what we've all come to the cinema for the titular Twisters. And this film, I'm delighted to say, does not disappoint. While tornadoes can be seen at regular intervals throughout, the peak action bookends the movie, with the first resulting in horrific consequences for, at the time, younger lead, and the latter bringing the movie to a satisfying, if not predictable, close. Admittedly, it often feels as though it's playing things just a little safe. The prime shock factor of the tornado horror is relatively subdued, and while I definitely don't want to be forced to endure the horrors of real-world tornadoes on screen, the Bane moment comes less than 15 minutes into the film. However, that might actually be a good thing. I mentioned briefly my lack of interest in watching real-world tornadoes play out. Many know all too well the true power of these natural titans, and the film does manage to touch on the horror of such power in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect in a big blockbuster movie. I think these types of films can very easily just ignore that these are real-world problems and they're not just out there for the big blockbuster. But in this mass audience movie all about them, it's actually surprisingly touching. All in all, Twisters gives you exactly what you want. Big tornadoes doing their thing, and storm chasers doing theirs. Best of all, however, the story still manages to pack a beefy, but not overwhelming punch amidst all the intensity of the heavy-hitting effects. That is my rough review for Twisters, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Before we close the episode off, time now for a little announcement about the show. As some of you may or may not know, this podcast ain't my first rodeo. I'm sorry. I previously hosted another show before this one, and I'm also currently producing videos and live streams for my Bendigo Blue gaming channel. Unfortunately, however, as a result of this, and the fact that, believe it or not, I do in fact have a life outside of this stuff, the Snack Break schedule has suffered, with episodes sometimes releasing every week, and at other times, well, let's just say they're not so consistent. As a result of this, I've decided that it is time to finally declare a set schedule for the release of Snack Break. A new main episode will be dropping on the feed every other week. These will continue to be on a Monday at 5 PM, and any bonus episodes will be released outside of this schedule. Most likely, knowing how these bonus episodes go into production, most likely as soon as we can get them out. That's for things like D23, Comic-Con. Once around the summer, there's not so many of these big announcements, but Doctor Who things, all those little bitty episodes that don't quite fit into the main episode formula. As I mentioned previously, this also, I just want to say now, might not work. I am pretty busy and podcast production takes a while, and I'm really keen to have this show be the very best that it can be, at least from my production point of view. So that means getting all the music, editing it to the best of my ability. So it takes a little while. Nonetheless, I am still greatly passionate about this show and the topics that it entails. So the new schedule is simply a way for me to keep doing something that I really, really enjoy. As always, thank you for listening to the show. We don't get many listeners, so if you've made it to this point, thanks very, very much for listening. That is how things are going to be going forwards on the podcast. It's time now for Bendigo's podcast, Perusings. This episode's suggestion is the Imp and Skiz podcast. This show, hosted by YouTubers and streamers, Impulse SV and Skizzleman, releases weekly episodes in which the creators discuss just about anything and everything. From life experiences, what's stopping you, a highly motivational entry to the list, appears to be a fan favourite, to life in the online space, to occasionally an entry focusing on their latest in-game endeavours, be it Secret Life or Skizzleman's long-awaited addition to the Hermitcraft server. The show is relatively lightly handled, yet executed with some of the best gear in the space. Honestly, I am so jealous. Really. Get to me, that SM7B. No, I'm joking, little pod mic, I love you. While early episodes don't use quite the same tech, it's generally a nice break from some independent podcasts, which, while great, many of which often use ear-grating USB mics. It's real. I know, I'm a picky listener, but it does annoy me, so I'm always glad to pop into an episode of Imp and Skiz for something that really does feel high quality. To add to this, Imp and Skiz are full of natural charm and charisma. They each possess an almost Bob Ross-like quality. It's true, strangely, and their years of friendship supports a show reliant on their chemistry. This allows it to be listened to, in my opinion, by just about anyone. While learning about the content creation space might not sound like everyone's cup of tea, these two handle it with such an approachable but not down-talking style that's an easy listen no matter your thoughts on the subject. All of that doesn't even mention some of my personal favourite episodes, the guest stars. These episodes follow Imp and Skiz out of the studio and onto the sofa, or as they would say, couch. We're on the couch today. I'm sorry, that sounded more Miley Cyrus and less Impulse SV, as they meet a guest, usually online, and take a foray into their life and career so far. These are usually split between 2 episodes. You get 2 whole hours, with the first focusing largely on content creation and their time in the space, and the latter their wider life and interests. These guests are usually friends of Imp and Skiz, so often follow a relatively similar trajectory. You know, most of them are Hermitcraft members, or have at least been involved in the live series. But the expertly presented interviews make them an incredibly fun listen, nonetheless. New episodes of the Imp and Skiz podcast are uploaded every single Friday, and man, they are consistent. And with a backlog of over 100 episodes, get ready to binge like never before. So, just to reiterate once again, if you want another podcast to listen to once you've finished this one, and of course binged all the episodes, of course, then I'd highly recommend the Imp and Skiz podcast. You can find that on all your major podcast platforms, as well as YouTube, and Spotify has recently signed them to put their video stuff over there as well. So if you listen on Spotify or YouTube, you can have a look at their faces and have a look at the gear and whatever takes your fancy. Unfortunately, that weird sentence concludes this week's episode of Snack Break, the perfect podcast to pop on while preparing your ideal snack or beverage. The show will be back in 2 weeks' time, gonna get used to saying that, where we'll dive into a brand new feature before unveiling Episode 8's special guest. For now though, I've been Bendigo Blue, I'm a member of Team Blaze, and Snack Break is a Hungry Capybara production. Thank you very much for listening, see you soon, stay safe,